Steeler Fury. SteelerFury.com.
Hey everybody, and Merry Draftmas. You are listening to the Pittsburgh Steelers Show on the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Will Mastersack, also known as Accidental Zen on Twitter, and you may know me as Bradshaw the Ben or B2B here on the Steeler Fury podcast. We are beginning season 13 of the longest running Steelers podcast in the world. Very excited to be here with you today on our favorite show of the year. This is our draft special where we talk about the Steelers' needs. We look at the overall NFL draft. We'll have some interviews with draft prospects that we got a chance to talk to this year. And the finale of the show, we will act out a Steelers war room for the draft where we bandy around potential players on the offensive and defensive sides of the football, and we argue amongst ourselves about which player is the right one to pick at each selection that the Steelers have in the draft. But without further ado, let's meet up with our usual suspects and get to talking about the Steelers offseason and what's transpired so far. To get us started, I have, as per usual, my two cohorts. First of all, from somewhere in Pittsburgh suburban zone 22, actually from somewhere off in a county in Pennsylvania with more bears than coronavirus. His name is Steel Perch. He's with us. How are you, sir?
Good to be back.
Yes, sir. And with us, after a brief hiatus where he was missing in action from somewhere in the greater south of the United States and trying to avoid his own brand of coronavirus despite flying, his name is FC. He's with us. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Coronavirus and tornadoes, neither one has been able to take me out yet. So
it's true, and we need you around, so you got to take care of yourself. But
yeah,
we have no contingency plan without you, so it's a real problem. We're going to have to get Kevin Colbert or something to find us a new FC on standby.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, gents, I figure we start talking with the state of the Steelers offseason, what's happened to this point in terms of free agency and the franchise tag. And I guess we'll start with Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree got the franchise tags, has not yet signed a deal, but it's a weird offseason. You don't really know if it's just because somebody hasn't, been in town to do a physical or what's happening. Very strange season. I'll start with you on this subject, Perch. What's your take on the Bud Dupree situation?
Well, they had to do it. I mean, they've got too many needs and not enough picks to address everything. They had to keep Dupree. It's just going to put them in a weird spot because Watt's up next year. And are they going to give Dupree a big deal this year? And then they've got to come back and give, Watt's they're going to be plunking down a lot of money at that position. Or do they just ride Dupree this year on the franchise tag, let him go next year and look to pick up somebody in the draft? Either way, maybe nice to kind of secure that position and use the future draft capital on the other holes on the team.
Sure. Although I don't know if it's the best year for edge rushers, but we'll get to that in a second. FC, what's your take on what they're planning with Dupree?
I'm thinking that I agree with Perch that they had to franchise him this year. I have a feeling that they can only pay one, and they're going to end up paying T.J. Watt, more consistent, more proven, younger. So I wouldn't be shocked if this is Dupree's last year in the black and gold. And I happen to agree with you. I think that it's not the matter of him not signing. His tender probably comes down to, league access and, physicals and the business side of the NFL. I mean, it's not uncommon at this point for players to be, they've been tagged not to have signed. So it's nothing alarming to me yet.
I mean, I kind of disagree with you two guys. I think that they're going to sign him. I think that the incentive for both sides is to sign a reasonable longer-term deal. And Dupree's price compared to, if you look at what the market is for a guy like him, isn't really that unreasonable. And I feel like they could, if they don't sign him to a long-term deal, then they'll definitely lose him next year when it comes time to do Watt's deal. But I have a feeling they might do both. I think they might try to sign Dupree to a 3 or 4 year deal and do Watt this offseason rather than wait for next year. And that really gives them a head start on some other problems they have next year, which is tackle and wide receiver with Juju.
I think Juju and Connor are both gone if they pay both of the outside edge rushers.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'd almost rather pay Dupree and Watt. I mean, Juju is the one, to me, it's sort of mysterious what they're going to try to do. But it does feel like that keeping the band together on defense for a year or two while Ben is still flipping it seems like a thing. Speaking of Ben, FC, what's your take on Ben's situation? It sounds like the rehab is good. I mean, we have no reason not to be optimistic, right?
It's exactly what I expected. I mean, it's the first major injury of his career, so, I am a bit leery, but at the same time, he's a large lad. He is tough, and he shows a want to continue to play the game. So I have a feeling that he's preparing as well as he can. I mean, I bet you he's, busting his butt on the rehab. I mean, he has a great support staff around him, his wife being a PA and being athletic, and he's going to have a good support system around him. Great surgeon. At UPMC, the doctor he's working with, Dr. James Harner, is world-renowned. He had it done by the best, elbow surgeon in the world, probably, at UCLA Medical Center. Everything is pointing in, a positive direction. Ben's a big, sturdy lad, and I won't be shocked that if he comes back, with a better arm than he's had the last 2 or 3 years with the velocity. I'm more concerned with touch, being away from the game, not throwing the ball, not being able to, work in the OTAs now after having it. But I expect come August, or September, whenever camp takes place, that Ben will be the least of the Pittsburgh Steelers' problems.
Yeah, let us hope so. I mean, Perk, I don't know if you've heard any word around the town in Pittsburgh, but it seems like I've heard from 2 different sources that seem fairly reliable to me that the type of surgery that he had, that generally the recovery is that when they finish rehab, they feel like nothing ever happened to their arm, like it's like new. But I wonder what you heard.
Yeah, I'm not a medical expert, but the biggest thing I think that came out of this whole thing was Ben himself coming out and admitting he's had pain in his elbow, and that's why he's had so much load management. And people always complaining about his Veteran Day off on Wednesday. The guy's been under pain. How good Ben's deep ball was throughout his entire career, and how crappy it's been the last couple, just kind of inaccurate. And the way he threw the ball in that first game and a half didn't look like Ben at all. Like, we all kind of started thinking, man, is this guy going over is he going over the edge? Is he losing it? What's wrong? And then, for him to just kind of leave the game without a contact injury. And, now he says he's throwing without pain for the first time in years. If that's the case, I mean, maybe he just extended his career another 3 or 4 years. Maybe he's still got more left in him if he, stays in shape and doesn't take another major injury. So that's a huge thing, and I don't know if this extra time off to rest is a help or a hindrance at this point. None of us are doctors, and none of us know how he really feels. But, I just thought that the most noteworthy thing that came out of this offseason was just him coming out and saying, hey, I've been in a lot of pain the last couple of years throwing the ball, where he's never said that, up until that point.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, though. Like, if he gets to pain free and it elevates his game from where we last saw him play well. I mean, from what I heard, he was talking about this elbow pain even before the 600-yard or the 500-yard 6-touchdown game, so that he was having problems already at that point of his career. You can only imagine what the guy could do if he was pain free. Flipping over to the wide receiver situation, Juju, this is in the last year of his deal. James Washington is only signed through 2021. I'm wondering if it's a case where maybe neither of them is going to be the long-term solution for the Steelers.
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be a lot of turnover. I mean, I think the smart thing probably is to do is to throw the money at the defense and secure your better unit. Keep those guys around. They're all still pretty young and they're all pretty productive. The offense, I mean, a lot of those guys are replaceable. The Steelers are really good at drafting receivers. This is a great draft to need a receiver, even at 49. They should be able to get somebody who could be starter or starter capable, year one. And by year 2, you let Juju go and replace with the guy from this year. If you don't get a receiver early in this draft, though, it just adds a whole nother mountain of problems you could see compounding in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I would say, I have nothing against what James Washington did in terms of for this season, but I just wonder if he's a guy that adds a lot of value as your quote-unquote deep threat that doesn't really pull defenders out of the box.
I don't see him as ever being more than a serviceable player, an average starter. If you're trying to win Super Bowls, you can't have just an average starter at one of your premier positions. You've got to do a little bit better. I don't think he's a bad player. I just don't think with his lack of speed, he's a true deep threat. His route running is not that great. I think he's a solid player. He's capable. He's just not a game breaker.
Let's talk for a second about the interior offensive line, FC with Foster retiring, and by the way, ton of respect for Foster. A lot of starts for a guy that was undrafted free agent and a real leader, I think, on the football team when a lot of things were crazy. But Foster retiring, BJ Finney not being re-signed, Pouncey getting near the end of his deal, and Villanueva, going to be a 32-year-old free agent. Steelers' offensive line situation might be one of the bigger question marks going into the draft, even after signing Wisniewski. What do you think of the Wisniewski signing? What do you think their situation really is?
Stefan Wisniewski doesn't look great until he's forced into the game. He's played him back-to-back Super Bowl teams. I believe he started right around 28 of the last 32 games. He can, center, play either guard, nice swing interior offensive lineman. The Steelers' offensive line for the upcoming season could be very intriguing. Do you move Filer over to left guard and move Chucks to right tackle and run that as your starting five? 49, you maybe hope that, you have a left tackle fall right to you. Sarcastically, in my very first mock draft, I said, what do we do if you have, an elite left tackle that falls into, not necessarily even elite, but a starting left tackle, and Austin Jackson. At the time, I said Josh Jones. If one of those two players fell to you at left tackle, it would have to be a consideration because of, the age of the offensive line. I think the Steelers' offensive line will probably be fine this year. Next year, you do run into problems. I believe this probably will be Pouncey's last year. You got Villanueva as a free agent. You're going to have to make a decision on Filer. I believe he was a restricted free agent this year. I believe he becomes unrestricted after the season. Yep. He may have one. So there's a lot of questions. What do you have with Chuck Okafor? If push comes to shove, can Zach Banner step in and play right tackle? Can he play left guard if push comes to the shove? So the Steelers do have a lot of question marks. Offensive line didn't look like one, but it's quickly becoming one.
Yeah, so we had this group together for a long time, and then they also all got towards the end at the same time, it seems like. So Perch, to that end, I feel like Banner has outplayed Chooks for 2 seasons now. So I'm wondering if we still have hope that Okafor is the answer to backup left tackle. Is he the left tackle of the future? I think the bloom is off that rose a little bit. What do you think?
That's the big question, but I agree on Banner. I think your best line for the year would be Banner at right tackle, and then kicking Filer to left guard, and keep Wisniewski as your backup across 3 positions on the interior line, and a core 4 as your backup swing tackle. I think that's the best case scenario. I really, really like the Wisniewski signing. If he signed up to be the backup at 3 positions on the interior, if he's coming to be a starting left guard, I don't know. I don't know if I like it quite as much. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But Filer is so versatile. If there was an injury, you can slide him back to right tackle, to left guard, maybe even the right guard. There's some versatility there. But, as much depth as the Steelers have had on that offensive line, it's been a real luxury. And now it's gone. And like FC said, you look to what happened next year. Villanueva's really got his ass kicked by some of the better edge rushers in the league. And he's going to be 32 this year. And, he's going to be a free agent next year. And Pouncey, we know how many injuries injury issues he's had. And there's a lot of what ifs on the offensive line. So I think they've got to draft at least an interior lineman or maybe a tackle if one fell, and that, the second or third round pick, they've got to get one pretty early.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say FC, which helps them more this year? A tackle that can be your backup swing tackle or backup, insurance policy for Villanueva at left tackle, or an interior lineman who might start for Pouncey next year?
See, I don't like the way the question's framed, because I honestly believe that in this year's draft that we could, at 49, get a starter at either position this year. I mentioned, I really believe in a scenario where Austin Jackson could be available to the Steelers at 49, the left tackle from Southern Cal. And I don't think the Steelers will pass on him. I won't be shocked if Jackson steps in and starts at right tackle, and then you would have Villanueva stay at left tackle, and you move Matt Fowler in to left guard. Next year, Villanueva leaves. Jackson goes out to left tackle. Fowler's re-signed, and he either stays at left guard or maybe he moves to right tackle. On the interior, I'm looking at the centers. I feel that you can find a guard in the 4th or 5th round that's very good. I don't think there's a ton of elite. Cesar Ruiz was a pipe dream for a lot of Steeler fans following to him. It's not going to happen. From there, the kid from Clemson's solid, but I just, if you're going to go offensive line, I think that you need someone that's going to start this year, especially with that pick 49.
Yeah, because that dream is a guy who is left tackle of the future, but starts off at right tackle, kick Fowler in. I mean, that to me is that's a dream scenario if you can find that, because not every left tackle is a guy that's going to start off at right tackle. You know what I mean?
Correct. You're 100% correct. There's a ton of guys that could play left tackle that have not been able to play right tackle at all in the NFL or even at the college level. Completely agree. They tried to do it with Tony Baselli. He couldn't do it. Blake Brockemeyer from the Chicago Bears 15 or 20 years ago, perennial Pro Bowl left tackle, couldn't move out to right tackle. I agree. I'm just saying that the one thing that I think the Steelers should be able to have done a ton of, you can't meet in person, but you can have studied some film and you can have interviewed and done your due diligence in that way. And that's one thing I'm going to give the Steelers credit, the scouting staff. I don't always agree with the picks. I think they do their homework. I think they may value some things more than they should, but they got the rings and they got the big paychecks, and I don't. So, but it's going to be a difficult pick, especially with no first-round pick this year. The Steelers picking at 49, they could have a very difficult decision.
Yeah, it's just having your first pick not until number 50 in the draft, and only having one pick in the top 100. Boy, that's tough.
Sure.
It's Steeler Fury. What we would do is trade down that pick the instant that it came up. But whether or not Colbert will see it that way is another story. So, Perch, just quickly, the other person we haven't mentioned is Javon Hargrave, who's gone, signed a deal with the Eagles. The Steelers didn't really do anything to replace him yet in the offseason. Maybe they're thinking Alualu is the guy that is the placeholder starter. What do you feel like they'll do to address that in the draft?
Yeah, McCullers is still hanging around on the roster. I don't know how they see Buggs if he's just a D end. They brought Wormley in, which I think he's definitely a defensive end, more of a 5-tech. But yeah, Alulu, McCullers, Buggs, those three, and I would assume they're going to throw either a draft pick or an undrafted free agent at the position too. But, again, that defensive tackle position's only on the field 35, 40% of the time now. So he's not really
27 last year. Oh, yeah, 27.
Yeah. So, if that's the case, you can use McCullers for short yardage. You can use Alulu for kind of base down stuff. Buggs can sub in. To me, I'm looking at this draft as they have 4 draft picks that are in the top, 200 or 197, whatever it works out to be. The other 2 are just luxury picks that you're just going to take a stab. 6th and 7th rounders, if they even make your roster, usually a bonus. So they've got 4 picks. I think they've got about 8 holes. So where are they going to spend those 4 premier picks? You've got receiver, you got running back, you've got interior offensive line, you've got offensive tackle. You need a free safety. They really need at least one backup safety that's competent, Could probably use a backup edge rusher, backup interior linebacker. You can use a nose tackle. They got about 8 needs, and they have about 4 picks that are worth shit. So good luck.
FC, I'll give you the last word on both what Perch was just talking about and also the Eric Ebron signing, which is the last piece we didn't talk about. What do you do? 6 picks and 8 holes.
Yeah, I mean, and you could ask 50 different Steeler fans and get 50 and like people that would list those needs in different order. I agree with what Perch said. Just filling in the holes is going to be difficult, but the thing is we'll say nose tackle. I think you could have a pretty decent shot at the 6th or 7th round, at least finding a guy that can play. Bravion Roy from Baylor stands out. Ray Lima from Iowa State. Tyler Clark from the University of Georgia, I think, is one of the most underrated prospects in this draft. And I think you can get any one of those 3 guys, maybe over the 6th or 7th round. Eric Ebron's going to really excite some people with some of his abilities if he can stay healthy. Do I love the pick? We'll see. I'm in wait and see mode. He is a definite upgrade in athletic ability and playmaking ability in the passing game for the Steelers. And they haven't got too great a blocking from whoever they played at tight end, so we'll not count that too much. I won't be surprised if the Steelers even draft a tight end. I mean, AO from Missouri, if he's sitting there in the 4th round, 6'5", 255 pounds, sub 4'5", you can't really coach or teach that. There's a ton of ability there. And, other than that, the Steelers' offseason has been pretty much what I expected. Did I expect them to sign Eric Ebron? No. Do I like that they signed Chris Wormley? Yeah, I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone, and I think that he fits what we do pretty well. I think that he could be a very sly addition to the Steelers' defense.
He seems like a classic 5-tech, excellent against a run, give you maybe not too much in the pass rush. But
at his very best, and if we can get anything close to that, I think we'll be thrilled.
Sure. Yeah, totally. Well, one last question for you both. Perch, worst first-round pick and the player that is going to drop out of the first round that everyone thinks is going in the first round. Just give me 2 names.
All right, so you're saying the worst player that is going to get picked in the first round? Let's see. I will give you. I'm going to go Jordan Love. I don't think he's actually. I know some people love him, some people hate him. And then what was the second question?
The player that's going to fall out of the first round that is expected to go first right now.
Boy, there's so many good receivers. You think one of them's going to fall? I keep seeing Jalen Reagor. I see him sometimes in the first, sometimes in the second. I don't think he goes in the first, but I like him. I think he falls to the second. I think all the running backs fall to the second. So I'll cop out and say all the running backs and Jalen Reagor are all going to go to the second round.
Fair enough. FC?
Well, if you're going to go big. I got 2 guys tied for number 1. Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama. And since we're going to pick on Alabama, I'm going to go with Jedrick Willis, also from Alabama. I think both are going to bust big time. And Tua, for he's small, tiny, lacks arm strength, and is an injury risk, obviously, with that hip. And Jedrick Willis was never good enough to start at left tackle for Alabama. How the fuck is he going to start at left tackle in the NFL? So that will be...
His quarterback was left-handed, though. Technically...
That's a very fair point, Perch. That is a very fair point. And the player...
You only get one acknowledgement of a good point, Perch, so enjoy it.
It's a very good point. And the player I see falling out of the first round that may surprise some people. How about I'll give you 2 that I think could be shocking. Number 1 is A.J. Espinosa from Iowa. Stiff. A lot of people are coming in thinking he's stiff and robotic. And Antoine Winfield Jr., who's flying up boards right now from Minnesota, free safety. Very big injury risk. And he doesn't have the heart that his father had. So those would be my 2 guys.
His father was excellent. His father was my favorite slot corner of all time. Guy was
tougher than a smaller steak, man. So tough.
It reminds me a lot of Bob Sanders.
There you go. That's fair.
Yeah, that's a fair comparison, I think. I'll give you mine. I think the guy that's going to go first round that I don't see being very successful, two of them might have been on my list, but since you said that, I'll say C.J. Henderson. Not sure that he is a first round corner. And then the guy that I think will fall is T. Higgins. For the reasons you said, FC, a lot of receivers, which push down his value a little bit. And also, if you really dig into his tape, he's kind of a sloppy player. There's a lot of potential there, but I'm not sure that he's really ready to jump right in. Excellent. Great segment on the state of the Steelers. I'll summarize. The summary is they did a lot of good things this offseason, and there's a million holes and only 6 draft picks. And the money cap contract situation for next year might even be worse. That's my summary. So with that in mind, let's move on and talk about the Steelers' draft needs this year. Can only deal with it 1 year at a time. So let's move on and talk about the Steelers' draft needs this year with a special guest. But first, a message from our sponsor, sportsandshit.com. Sportsandshit.com is the place to get your Steeler Fury swag, Steelers merchandise, and new just for the quarantine season, we've got normalcy t-shirts, tank tops, coffee cups, and more. Visit us at sportsandshit.com and see what's new. Sports and Shit, stuff you need. All right, so joining me and making his Steeler Fury podcast debut, it's hard for me to believe this is your first time on the show. You may know him as Smith is Smoke, and his name is Jeremy Kohlman. He's with us. How are you, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
It's quarantine America. That's what I heard. It most definitely is. I'm in New York City, so it's really quarantine America here.
Yeah.
What part of the land are you in experiencing this?
I'm in Indianapolis, so not quite as bad as New York.
No, although maybe it's going to happen there, but later. I mean, no one knows. I suppose.
We're supposed
New
to
York
get our peak here, in the next week or two. So hopefully, if it happens soon and happens quick, so we can all get back to our normal lives.
Yeah, let us hope. Well, in order to have a degree of normalcy, we're talking Steelers draft, and I think always like to try to have a segment talking about the Steelers' needs in the draft and how we see them. So far this offseason, I feel like I've been more in touch with the front office than usual. Not, maybe it's because I was less talking about what they should do, or from my own standpoint, and more thinking of it in terms of what is it? How is this setting up? What are they going to do in terms of who they're letting go and restructuring? I mean, obviously they put the franchise tag on Bud Dupree. We don't know if that's going to lead to a deal or not. I don't know if they encouraged Foster to retire, but he walked away as the starting left guard. They did, in fact, release Mark Barron, who was at least number 2A in the inside linebacker rotation. And they lost B.J. Finney, who was their game day backup. They signed Steven Wisniewski. They signed Eric Ebron as a tight end. And they signed fullback Derek Watt. I guess I was trying to figure out which Watt. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty accurate.
So being that that's all in place, how do you feel about the state of what they did in the offseason, and where do you think that leaves the Steelers in terms of what work is left to be done, especially with the draft?
Well, I really like the Steven Wisniewski signing. That spells Steelers all over it. That's their typical, we're going to go get a veteran at a good rate. And then the thing I love the most about it is that he's been on the last 2 Super Bowl squads. So he's someone who can give the Steelers that Super Bowl type mind frame, because he'd love to go 3 for 3 and get another ring, obviously. The Eric Ebron signing surprised me because being here in Indianapolis, I do follow the Colts to a degree. They are the hometown team. But from everything I heard about Ebron was that he wasn't that hard of a worker, and that, he wasn't willing to play through injury. So initially I was a little surprised when the Steelers went out and signed him, but I am a fan of his athletic receiving ability. We've desperately needed that at tight end since Vance McDonald can't seem to stay healthy for a full year.
No, and I mean, I don't know if McDonald was injured last year and playing through it, or if he was just demoralized because of the situation there on offense. But I feel like, his play, particularly as a blocker, really concerned me. Ebron's not really going to help you very much in that regard, typically. But he would tell you otherwise. By the way, Eric Ebron is like he has the biggest rabbit ears of anyone on Twitter not named Ryan Switzer, who I think is the other one that reads everything about himself for some reason. But to me, I would start by saying it's not necessarily the most major need that they have, but some kind of a blocking tight end solution. I don't know if that's something you address in the draft or free agency. I mean, how do you feel about that? What is the third tight end situation like for the Steelers?
I mean, they say they like Gentry, but I'm not sold on him. I wasn't sold on him when they picked him. Honestly, I think the way to go this year would be to try to find a free agent, just because this year's tight end class is kind of all over the board. You've got a lot of projects, like Harrison Bryant, who's only played the position for 1 year. Got a lot of athletic receiving types, like Albert O from Missouri, kid from Washington whose name's escaping me right now. I think it's the other Bryant.
Hunter Bryant, yeah.
Hunter Bryant, yes, Hunter Bryant. But I don't really see anyone in the draft that's going to really be able to come in and help right away. So I definitely think a free agent would be the way to go there. I'm not exactly sure who, but I also see Derek Watt kind of taking over, maybe not the third tight end role, but maybe that third blocking role. And we have to remember the Steelers love to throw out their third tackle as a third tight end. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. I could see them taking like priority undrafted free agent, but I'm not really sure they're in love with the tight end crop. I'm certainly not anyway.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're going to spend a pretty high pick on Adam Troutman, who looks like it's somebody that at least has some blocking capability. I mean, Harrison Bryant has some ability, but both those guys are going to go higher than their actual value is, just because of the scarcity of talent, I think. What do you think of Asiasi from UCLA? He's one that I think maybe has some possibility in the mid rounds.
Yeah, we've definitely talked about him. I know through text message I compared him to ex-Hoosier, now Carolina Panther, Ian Thomas. He was kind of a late developer at tight end, but he's got the tools. He could I would like to see the Steelers spend a pick on him, maybe with their last fourth round pick, because definitely don't think you're going to see a tight end go in round 1 this year, but you're going to start seeing him come off the boards in round 2 and 3, but I don't think he'll go that high, but you never know.
The offensive line situation. So they lost Finney, Foster retired. They did pick up the options basically for Matt Filer and for Zach Banner, and they added Wisniewski. Before they added Wisniewski, I would say that they absolutely have to, in the draft, get an interior lineman who can play center, because they need it for a game day backup. But now that they signed Wisniewski, it seems like they may go interior line, but I'm starting to think that maybe the left tackle position might be more of a concern, since Alejandro Villanueva is going to be a 32-year-old free agent at the end of the season, and I'm not really sure any of the other guys is left tackle capable. Are you on board with me with that, or do you think they still have their focus on an interior lineman?
I think, honestly, I think they should try to get an outside guy, who can play left tackle, but then also target an inside guy. This offensive line class is a pretty good class. It doesn't have a lot of star power, but it's got a lot of good players to it. Definitely agree that Villanueva is probably the only guy who is left tackle capable at the moment. We also what Chukwuma Okorafor did. I think it was last year, and we aren't a fan of him at left tackle right now. Maybe a right tackle. Even then, Zach Banner might be able to fill in left tackle for a game or two, but he's going to run into similar problems that Okorafor did. They're just massive men who aren't lateral movers.
Yeah, well, I thought that Banner he shocked me with how good he looked at left tackle, at least in preseason, where he's playing against maybe a little lower level competition than he might if he were starting for an extended period. But as a game day backup, he doesn't scare me too much. But yeah, for an extended period of time, they don't have that guy. And if you're going to have to pay Villanueva, and if his play is a little bit on the decline, like it appears that it might be, then I always feel like they always draft a year ahead. So they're looking for what's coming up down the pipe. And so they're at least going to not let themselves go into 2021 without getting a left tackle somehow in this process. That's kind of what I think. But, if Wisniewski is going to start at guard and they're not going to move Filer over there, then you have the same problem. You need a game day backup who's center capable. Or you're going to make changes at two positions, which they never like to do in the middle of a game. With only 6 draft picks, it's like
it's a tough year to have only 6 draft picks.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like they don't have a lot of like needs at the top, but it feels like their backup roles and future roles they're going to get into some issues if they don't.
Yeah, depth wise is where that's really going to hurt them this year, I think.
Sure.
Potentially.
Well, let's talk about the missing starter, because since Javon Hargrave walked away, and that's a name we didn't mention earlier, to me that's the one obvious spot where they don't have a player. They don't really even have unless you're going to start Big Dan or start Alualu, and either one of them is going to be basically stationary target who's going to clog up the middle, but they're not going to do much else for you. What do you feel like about?
I agree. They could. I feel like they could get by without maybe a true starting nose tackle, but that's not exactly how the Steelers have played it. Even though when they had to replace Casey Hampton, they had someone developing behind him, and like Steve McClendon, or had like the dependable Chris Hoke there as like a stopgap, but I don't really get the sense of that of anyone on the roster. So, I think that should be a target, at least on day 3, if not on day 2.
Yeah, the thing is, nobody likes to put a priority on a player that they know is only going to be the focus of the defense for a third of the play, or even less, a quarter of the play. But you still, for that 25-27% of the snaps, you still need a guy. It's like you can't skate on that just because it's 27%, because sometimes it's really important 27%. Like we're trying to stop a 3rd and 1, and we're trying to stop goal line.
Right, you need that guy.
Yeah, and I think that's or you want to stop the other team if they're going to try to get you in base and then pass against you. If you don't have a nose tackle that penetrates, that's a problem. And the whole reason for it, this is something I tried to explain to someone on Twitter recently. It was like, they only need a space eater at nose tackle. They don't need a penetrating pass rush guy. And I said, well, the whole reason that they, when Dick LeBeau left, that they moved to playing more of a one gap situation was because they were getting killed by teams who were doing stretch plays against them, and playing solid 2-gap defense against a good stretch running team is a disaster. Just is not going to work for you at all. The only thing you can do to stop that really is to get penetration in the middle and just knock all the timing of everything off, so that the running back never gets a chance to find that crease. Because eventually, if you make everyone slide to the edge, at some point that chain is going to break just enough for the a good running back to cut through it. So what's your thought in terms of who's in this draft class that sort of fits that time frame? Like maybe don't want to use your first pick for it, but mid-round pick who can still be a penetrating nose tackle. Where you stand on that? Who do you like?
I'm kind of going to go to one of your guys, Melvin Agim from Arkansas. Got to see him down at the Shrine Bowl this year, and he impressed me down there, and he's been getting a lot of good press lately, so it wouldn't surprise me to see the Steelers use it on a guy like him, because he's capable of holding up against the run, but he's also quicker than given credit for.
Yeah, well, it feels like he's sort of a similar athlete to Hargrave.
Right.
So that, getting somebody that can play a similar style and who's maybe not the same player, but has elements of that. Seems like it's an easier transition for a rookie when everybody else knows what to expect. But I expected you to say Jordan Elliott. That was the name that came to mind.
I'm not sure if he's more of a nose tackle or more of a 3-4 defensive end. I feel like his length would be more useful on the outside, but one player athletically I've compared him to is Chris Jones, but Chris Jones doesn't play nose tackle like we have asked like Javon Hargrave and stuff to do. But I am a big fan of Jordan Elliott. It's more just where I think is fitting, because we have a ton of 3-4 defensive ends. We got Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Tyson Alualu proven to be a decent backup. We just traded for Wormley, from Baltimore. It's like I feel like we've got a lot of 3-4 defensive ends, and I've been debating with myself whether I liked Elliott more at end to be able to chase down a play, or more in the middle.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I feel like the interior defensive line in general in the NFL and interior offensive line, that the league is moving over the last few years to players with more and more length. It used to be that you ended up in the middle because you had short arms or you were short, stocky, kind of build. But it seems like the league is, kind of answering that now with longer and longer players. So that's why the fact that Jordan Elliott has sort of longer build doesn't make me think he's not a nose tackle type, because I feel like those guys in the league have changed. Maybe it's just me.
They definitely have. With it becoming more of a passing league, the nose tackle has been asked to do more.
Yep.
So the run stuffers, are getting drafted later. A guy a few years ago I thought for sure was going to go in the first round was Billings, who's with Cincinnati, or at least he was. I was certain he was going to go in the first round, but once you get labeled just a run stuffer, your draft stock shoots way down.
Yeah, exactly. What's your take on, just while we're on the subject, Devon Hamilton, who's a player that I know a lot of people think might be a fit? Too much of a run stopper first guy?
He's long and athletic, kind of like you said. He's 6'4", like 320. That's a big guy. But what impressed me so well was how well he moved at the combine. It's like he kind of showed. I think he's got that athleticism. If he's asked to go after the quarterback more, I think he might actually be able to do it. He kind of got stuck as more of a run guy at Ohio State. And Ohio State's so deep at defensive line, they rotated guys all the time. So that might be one of those players that might actually end up having a better pro career than a college career.
Yeah, well, he comes from the farm team too, so that gives him a leg.
Right. Yeah,
for sure. Well, let's stay on defense for a second. The inside linebacker situation. What's your take on what you think they'll do? Are they going to just trot Vince Williams out there as Bush's partner on base downs, or will they add somebody to that, or will Ulysses Gilbert get a shot? What's your take?
I think Vince Williams. I think he's a much better player than a lot of people give him credit for. I definitely think he'll be out there in base defense, where like you say, is the worry is more about coverage. He's never been that great in coverage. A guy I really like in the draft is Akeem Gaither-Davis. He just has the athletic ability that the Steelers are really starting to covet, and really the whole league is starting to cover at linebacker, going 6'3", right around 230. And he can really run, but what is great about him is he's got good hips, and he can drop, and he can cover. So I could see the Steelers spending a day 2 pick on a linebacker that could develop.
Yeah, to me, the thing that scares me about both this and another perceived need that I have, which is, sort of either the third, whatever you want to call it, third safety,
right,
safety linebacker hybrid to play in this, big nickel or dime packages. If you get a guy like Gaither from App State, maybe he can be that guy for you. So you might be able to get an inside linebacker that fits that, or you might be able to get yourself a safety that fits that. But the point is, that guy, I think, has to have height or length and coverage because, for better or worse, in terms of what Bush did in his first season, he's never going to be long, and he's not really the kind of guy to carry a tight end up the field. That's not his game, right?
Right.
So even if I might say, he played better than maybe what my expectations were, and you can see where the possibilities are with him. But if you're going to build around him, then you got to have a third safety. You got to have a linebacker pair with him that has some kind of size and length, in my opinion, because otherwise you're just going to get killed by this, they'll just trot out big slot receivers and tight ends and force Devin Bush to cover those cats. Your idea of adding the linebacker at that high cost, I don't know. It's like, okay, so we've touched on almost all of it. We didn't get to the skill positions, but basically we talked about maybe a third tight end, interior or left tackle, offensive line, nose tackle, some kind of linebacker or safety situation. And now I'm going to turn it around and ask what I started to ask before is, what do you think the priority is? We didn't even mention playmaker for the offense, which is something that maybe that might be their first pick. But what do you feel like that, with only 6 picks, how do you prioritize that in your mind?
Yeah, it's tough to do that this year. I think the Steelers are in a really good position to draft just best player available, because they've got quite a few needs, that we've talked about already, and it might just be, this really talented players here at 49. Maybe we should take him. But like you said, there should be a few wide receivers that could be interesting at 49. Brandon Ayuk's a favorite of mine from Arizona State. Can do just about anything you ask him to do. My still real question is how far is Laviska Shenault going to fall? Because I absolutely love his tapes and I love how he plays the game. He's so much faster than what he timed in Indy.
Yeah.
But as far as priority goes, the Steelers have continued to mention, when they drafted Mason Rudolph, they had an eye towards the future. And if any position tells me eye towards the future, it's left tackle to me. If there's a guy there at 49 that they believe can develop into a franchise left tackle, I feel like you have to take it.
And I mean, they've been saying edge and how much they love this edge class. That scares the daylights out of me. But because I see some my usual array of sort of under the radar cats that seem to be pretty interesting to me. But the top of this class, once you get past Chase Young, I don't know. I mean, but if you want to talk about the future, if you're not going to re-sign Bud, you need not just an edge player, but you need a strong side edge player.
Right.
that can play opposite TJ Watt, who's more of your chaser cover guy edge. Those are strong side edge are hard to find, man. Guys that are two-way players that way.
I agree. Like you said, after Young, I definitely don't think your True Gross Matos from Penn State. I don't think he can play 3-4 outside linebacker. I think he definitely has to have his hand in the dirt. A guy that kind of intrigues me in that middle round that should be available is Terrell Lewis from Alabama. The only problem is he's only got one move, and that's speed. So he's going to have to develop there. And even then, he's had trouble staying healthy, and he hasn't quite had the production you'd want to, from an edge guy either. So, yeah, I really hope you're correct, and the Steelers are just kind of floating out smoke that they love this edge class.
which they never do. So that would be a surprise to everybody. Well, I mean, I would say about the skill positions, just to finish on that note, it feels like to me the element that's missing is speed. That the Steelers' skill position players right now, from top to bottom, they basically have Kareth White, and who's a fringe player to make the roster at this point if everyone's healthy. Otherwise, they really don't have anybody with what I would call, real honest to God, like the defensive coordinator and safeties are thinking about that guy from the start of the week.
Yeah. They desperately need speed.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I mean, I think you pay a premium for speed. In other words, you have to draft a guy a round or two earlier than he might go based on his other attributes. I mean, I personally, Antonio Gibson to me is a guy that stands out in that regard, just because, he lessens the pressure on you to add another wide receiver or another running back, with urgency, because he can give you something at both positions. But aside from that, what do you think about maybe like a Claypool or someone like that? Yeah,
I guess the real question is, how are you going to use Claypool? Are you going to line him outside? Is he going to make the full transition to tight end or whatnot? If I'm the Steelers, I don't know how great of a blocker he is, so I'm not sure if I'd consider him as a tight end right now.
Yeah,
just because that's kind of their need is more of a blocker at tight end.
Well, and I think you beg a really more important question that most people don't think about, and that is if you draft this great player who's great in a vacuum, you have to know how you're going to fit him into your team and what the ramifications of that are, like how much it makes you better. I've been talking about looking towards the future. I'm not sure how James Washington stays on this team, at least not as a starter, because I feel like DJ is, that guy is going to explode in year 2 in all likelihood. And okay, maybe you let Juju go and you decide not to pay him, but replacing kind of the role of that sort of big slot receiver that Juju is filling right now, that's a little bit easier to do in the draft.
Right.
Getting a speed guy who's a real deep threat, who threatens defenses. Like Washington, I feel like makes plays, and I'm actually was pretty happy with how he played in a way. But he's not the guy that's going to make the whole offense open up. So are you looking – that's the thing. In this draft, are you looking for a guy to replace Juju next year or a guy to be a better outside receiver for Washington? Or what's – are you just taking the best receiver available?
Yeah, that's the question. Honestly, I'm kind of in the mode of taking the best receiver available. Because let's say if Jalen Reagor is still available in round 2, I don't think he will be. I think he'll be gone long before then, just because of his speed and his playmaking ability. But it's hard to pass on a guy like that. He's so dynamic with his speed, and like you said, we have such a need for it. Another guy I like is T. Higgins. But he doesn't have as much of an all-around game as some of the other receivers in this draft. He's more of a just stretch player. He doesn't do much underneath, as to where the Steelers have asked a lot of their wide receivers to be able to run after catch in recent years, with kind of just how Todd Haley evolved the offense and now how Randy's got it. We've had a lot of run after the catch plays where I'm not sure if Higgins fits that role. I think he was good at the one thing he did at Clemson. That's just what they asked him to do. I definitely think he could develop into a all-around player, but
that's a big project
to be seen.
I think it's a big project though, even though he was good at a high level with what he was doing, because pretty sloppy, route breaks and just stuff that maybe you can fix and make better, and he would be great. But you're investing a pretty high pick in a guy that is going to require some work to get out of the shop.
Yeah, no, I agree. My mid-round wide receiver this year that I would love to take is Brandon Ayuk. I actually got, when I was down at the Shrine Bowl, 2 people that kind of went down with the group that I went down with actually coached him when he was at JUCO before he went to Arizona State. And they just raved about his work ethic. And that's the type of player I want, going to the Steelers with their premium pick. A guy who's going to work his tail off. He's got great hands. He can do a lot of different things that this offense can ask him to do. He's not the tall receiver everyone wants, but I think the tall over receiver is very overrated in today's NFL.
Well, I just feel like if in a vacuum, I love the idea of Brandon Ayuk. It's just like if you had a guy to already blow the top off coverage and Deontay Johnson, if you had those 2 guys and you didn't have Juju, like imagine that we're a year into the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then adding just the best wide receiver available who's a super hard worker and willing to do everything, man, that sounds fantastic to me. But, without having that guy to take the top off, I just feel like you have all this lack of speed at running back that you just inevitably your offense is going to bog down. Like you don't have this real ability to like consistently get splash plays with the speed or to open things up in the middle. You're going to see a lot of packed in defenses, and that to me is that's hard football to watch, man. Let us hope that we don't have to endure that again.
Oh no!
Last name I'll throw at you, Quez Watkins. Maybe to me is a cat that both provides real speed that you got to worry about on the outside, can play outside, and is a guy that can, take the ball on a little slant and take it 65 yards, and probably available, late. Maybe the problem with him is he goes in between their late 4th and their 6th, which is a real problem.
Yeah, I agree. I like Quez Watkins a lot. It's funny. before the football season got started, I was just on YouTube looking at highlights, just to look at athletic profiles, guys I should maybe watch for. And his name came up, and I watched his film, and I was like, yeah, this guy's he's a good player. He's got some speed, but I'd like to see if the speed's the real deal, and fast forward, 7 months now, and then you see him run that at the combine, it's like, oh, okay, he's actually pretty legitimate.
Yeah, well,
so he would definitely be a guy to pique your interest.
I find it funny, like, when you see guys in person from close up, like when you're on the sideline, and you're like, wow, that guy's really fast. Like, you don't know, is he fast because I'm standing down here on the field and I can just really see it? Or is he fast because he's really fast, Or,
right.
or big, same thing. I was standing next to Javon Mosley, and it's just like, that dude is really big. like I've seen big guys and I've met offensive linemen and shit, but yeah, he's just like an enormous dude, Anyway, I guess that's mostly what we have time for. I'm just going to finish this segment with one last question. I don't think either one of us really wants the Steelers to spend a draft pick on a quarterback, but just for 1 minute, let's talk about who's the best quarterback that's not going to get drafted that you might convince to come as the fourth arm here in Pittsburgh and tell them that, that third spot is up for grabs.
Not get drafted, but still be good enough to play. I'll go with my guy, Jamar Smith at Louisiana Tech. They valued these kind of athletic quarterbacks. We saw it with Josh Dobbs, when they took him in the fourth round. I definitely think they'd like a guy who could at least emulate, at least in practice, what a Lamar Jackson type can do. Because let's face it, we're probably going to be seeing him for the next at least 5 to 6 years in Baltimore. So my guess is they're going to take a guy like him who can emulate his athletic ability, but still can have good pocket presence and still be able to throw a good ball. So that'd be my guy, Jamar Smith from Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, he's got some really good pocket movement. What's the guy that the University of Arizona cat?
Khalil Tate.
Khalil Tate, yeah. I'm not sure I would invest in him as a long-term quarterback, but if you want a guy that gives you a little bit of everything and it gives you a little bit of that look, he's more another one that fits.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, the guy I like, I think is, kind of coming on late for me in terms of my awareness of him is Kenji Bahar from Monmouth. I don't know if you've seen him play, but he has that gift that we all appreciate here in Pittsburgh, which is, escapability from the pocket, but without just immediately turning to run. He uses, he views sidestepping a pass rusher as an opportunity to make a play downfield. And in the great Gil Brandt's famous words, that what he likes to look for in quarterbacks is quarterbacks that are capable of making all the same plays they make from the pocket, but when they're forced into a weird, arm angle or, a different off-platform kind of throw. To him, that's a real key for a quarterback. And I don't think I saw anybody who was better off-platform than Bahar. I'm thinking maybe he's going to not be drafted, but he'll be a guy that's going to somebody's camp and making a little noise. But to me, it's like I'm all for that. Yeah, I don't know if I want to spend a pick 49 on Jalen Hurts, but I'm like, I'm.
Oh God, no.
All right. Well, anything we missed in the segment? Any last thoughts?
I think we covered most of the things. I think we're all just kind of in this wait and see mode. I think what's going to be the most interesting is how the NFL teams are going to be adapting to this whole let's pick online deal now. So no more running to the podium, hopefully.
Well, I'm thinking Kevin Colbert doesn't even have a smartphone, so I'm not sure that this is a real advantage for the Steelers. This technology, man. They're like, okay, so you can talk to somebody on your computer. Like, is this like Facebook? It's like my mother-in-law.
Right. Can
you tell me the difference between Facebook and FaceTime? Because I don't understand. Yeah.
Right.
That's Kevin Colbert in my mind, So anyway, Jeremy Kohlman, thanks for being with us. Smith is smoking.
Thanks for having me on.
Smith is smoking has spoken.
Boogeyman.
Once again, that was Jeremy Kohlman, also known as Smith is Smoking if you're on the SteelerFury.com message boards. Nice enough to join us and talk Steelers football. Well, that'll do it for episode 1 of our 3-part pre-draft extravaganza here at Steeler Fury Podcast. In part 2, we'll talk with Ryan Roberts, the scouting director of the NFL Draft Bible, and we'll also hear some interviews with potential NFL prospects that we got a chance to talk with during the course of the year. Don't forget, you can support the show by going to our Patreon page, Steeler Fury Podcast at patreon.com, and becoming a subscriber. But for now, I am your host, Will Massasak, /BradshawToBen, /AccidentalZen on Twitter, saying, go get 'em, Steelers.